Good morning and welcome to this press conference in the National Press Theatre. Today with us we have Lisa Hepfner and the Economic Equity Alliance. Go ahead, guys.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nancy Wilson and I'm the founder and CEO of the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce. The Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce, or CanWCC, is the first and only Chamber of Commerce in Canada that specifically represents and advocates for the 2.1 million self-identified women and non-binary founders, entrepreneurs, and business owners across the country. During the COVID-19 lockdown, I had the opportunity to meet with and attend meetings held by the large provincial and national chambers of commerce and trade associations. It was made clear to me during that time that the regular geographically based board of trades and chambers of commerce do not represent all business owners. Despite all good intentions, chambers of commerce have not kept pace with the changing profile of the communities that they represent. The result is that policies put forth lack an inclusive lens, and folks are falling through the cracks. So for the last year, CanWCC has organized meetings of a group called the Economic Equity Alliance, or the Alliance. The Alliance explores the challenges faced by the self-employed. This group is made up of 12 organizations that share an interest in the self-employed, but generally don't work together. It includes unions, chambers of commerce, feminist organizations, and entrepreneurship groups. Today, I'm happy to be here to announce the release of the Alliance's report, Invisible Entrepreneurs: The Impact of Small Business Policy Neglect on Self-Employed Individuals. The Alliance's observations and conclusions in the report are straightforward. Number one, the self-employed are a diverse group, but they share common issues. Number two, the self-employed have been ignored and excluded in small business policies and programs for far too long. This is not a new problem, nor is it unique to the current government. It's a long-standing issue that must be addressed. Finally, the lack of support for the self-employed stems from and results in systemic gender and racial discrimination. 80% of self-identified women entrepreneurs, 50% of Black entrepreneurs, and 68% of Indigenous entrepreneurs are self-employed. So when a program or a policy excludes the self-employed, that means that 80% of women, 50% of Black, and 68% of Indigenous entrepreneurs are excluded from that policy or program. Our report makes 5 recommendations, including social policy supports, T1 income tax reform, and funding for community organizations. I'm so happy to have with us today, sorry, you're over there. I'm so happy to have with us today MP Lisa Hepfner, the MP of Hamilton Mountain, and the Parliamentary Secretary for the Department of Women and Gender Equality and Youth, and I'd like to invite her to speak.
Thank you so much. And just let me take a minute to acknowledge that we're gathered on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. And it's so great to be here today with you all to celebrate the release of the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce report, as you mentioned, Invisible Entrepreneurs: The Impact of Small Business Policy Neglect on Self-Employed Individuals. We know that during the pandemic, we saw who was disproportionately impacted. It was women, it was youth, and it was women-led industries like tourism, hospitality, and healthcare. They were decimated during the pandemic. And so when we talk about emerging out of the pandemic, we know our window to make change is right now. Retooling how we work and how our economy works for us is right now. And so I'm grateful that organizations like the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce see this opportunity to rebuild our communities, our economy, and our country in a way that benefits everyone. We want to be guided as we move forward in these principles of equity, inclusivity, and fairness. We want to work together to build a future where every woman can unleash her full potential and contribute to the prosperity of our nation. And we need the data, we need the research, we need projects like this so that we can make the right investments to promote leadership of women, make sure that they have good jobs and opportunities to shine, and to protect our shared future. In 2022, nearly 1 million women in Canada were self-employed. That represents over a third of the total of self-employed population. So that's a significant increase from previous decades. And the full and equal participation of women in our economy isn't just about fairness, it's been a driving force behind approximately 1/3 of our economic growth. So our government collaborates with women's organizations and experts to facilitate this economic participation of women. And that's also why organizations like the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce are so crucial, demonstrating exemplary leadership in supporting women entrepreneurs, advancing initiatives for self-employment, and fostering inclusive environments. It's not just about empowering women, it's about strengthening our economy and promoting inclusivity for all. So thank you for having me here today. Thank you to the organizers and the stakeholders and the stakeholders for fighting for building a more feminist and more equitable economy that works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Tracey Ramsey, and I'm pleased to be here today representing Unifor and the Canadian Freelance Union, a Unifor community chapter and a part of this important coalition to bring economic equity to Canada's self-employed workers. This project, along with many others, has shown that government policy creates systemic barriers that restrict access to important government support programs that improve incomes and outcomes for self-employed workers. One of the most important changes government can make to create more equitable outcomes for women and racialized self-employed workers is to expand eligibility to employment insurance and increase the number of weeks of support. Self-employed workers need access to EI in the event of a break in work contracts, or if they become ill and need access to sick leave. They also need access to income support when they become parents, and the benefits must be stacked so that accessing benefits during a break in contracts doesn't disqualify a person from accessing full parental leave benefits. Employment insurance is an important economic stabilizer. Government must get the policy right and get it right now so it is ready to prevent financial and economic catastrophe. The report clearly shows that government is failing women and racialized freelancers and other self-employed individuals when it comes to accessing capital. Self-employed people were left out of accessing important pandemic supports to access capital that would have supported businesses to continue through the pandemic. But the problem existed long before the pandemic arrived. Government continuously forgets to ensure that self-employed individuals are included in programs such as the Canada Jobs Grant, CEBA, and the Canada Digital Adoption Plan. Unifor is actively urging the government to adjust its financial support structures to address the needs of Canada's modern, diverse workforce. Finally, moving quickly on universal pharmacare and expanding the dental care program will substantially change the financial lives of self-employed workers who may not have previously had access to health insurance. These have been long-standing demands to build equity and financial inclusion, and I'm thrilled to be here as part of this important coalition to raise these demands on behalf of Canada's self-employed workers, Unifor, and the Canadian Freelance Union. And now I'd like to pass it over to Navya.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Navya Baradi, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Collective of Women in Business. We're a nonprofit organization dedicated towards amplifying the voices of students working towards gender equity across Canadian campuses. Our team has heard the stories of many young women who've transformed their hobbies and creative interests into side businesses during the pandemic, especially as jobs in the service industry, many of which were held by young women, became precarious. We were honored to join the Alliance, especially to represent the needs of students that turn to self-employment as a means of supporting themselves in their education. Public policy discussions about small businesses, however, consistently focus on employers and formally waged employees with benefits. The Alliance's report shows how this excludes 10% of Canadian businesses and workers who are self-employed, making it harder for them to survive, make a living, and grow their businesses. Further, like Nancy mentioned, equity-seeking groups are disproportionately represented in self-employment. Apart from 80% of women entrepreneurs being self-employed, more than half of Black and Indigenous entrepreneurs are self-employed. 25% of all self-employed individuals also are people of color. And the lack of policy considerations for self-employed people exacerbates the barriers that marginalized communities must overcome for meaningful participation in the economy. For many marginalized individuals, self-employment is more than just a platform for pursuing innovative ideas beyond traditional employment. It's a necessity fueled by various intersecting factors like gender, race, geographic location, and socioeconomic status. We must ensure equitable opportunities, support, and resources are available to support these individuals in their pursuit of self-employment. Further, a recent RBC Small Business Survey revealed that younger millennial and Gen Z generations are spearheading a micro-entrepreneur economy, which entails starting small businesses to combat rising inflation and digitization. And as young people are increasingly turning towards self-employment to support themselves, it is critical for the government to respond accordingly to design policies that will build a more inclusive Canadian economy. And with that, I'll pass it to Judy.
My name is Judy Rebick. I've been on many panels, and usually when I'm on a panel with chambers of commerce, it's to debate them, because I have found myself on the opposite side of most issues with chambers of commerce. So when Nancy called me and asked if I was interested in working on this project, I have to say I was very skeptical, and that was 2 years ago. And what I found amazes me, which is there is this huge group of self-employed entrepreneurs who can't get capital because they're discriminated against because they're women or they're Black or they're Indigenous or they're new immigrant. And so they stay self-employed. And then we have all these other self-employed people, of which I'm one, who for years and years and decades, in fact, the first book I saw on this was published in 1979 about the lack of social and economic supports for self-employed people. And we're talking about 1 million women, we're talking more like 3 million people. It's not a small group. And no government has come out in support, except for the Quebec government, which at least gives self-employed people a way to have maternity and paternity leave. In Quebec, you have it if you're self-employed. I was just talking to someone yesterday who was self-employed and who really had a hard time having children and going on maternity leave because she couldn't figure out how to get it. And what's happened in the Alliance, which includes, I think it's unique, I'd never heard of a coalition that includes unions and chambers of commerce and business groups before. And it's amazing how much we've had in common. Like, it just blows my mind every day. And what we found was very similar. We had focus groups right across the country in every province, very diverse in age, diverse in race, diverse in activity. And we found that the problems were the same, that people who are self-employed feel isolated, feel betrayed by the government, feel like they can't get help anywhere. And the Alliance has been a way to support those people and to help them figure out how to work together, for one thing. And the other thing is to have a group that's going to pressure the government to change the policies. I appreciate that the government is sympathetic, but they're not doing anything. And EI, for example, a good example, there's been, 2 years now of consultation on changing EI, and nothing's been done about it. And self-employed people do not have access to EI. And so, or, like I said, maternity leave. Donc, je suis très, très contente d'être ici avec tous les autres pour dire que l'heure est arrivée de faire quelque chose pour le gouvernement, de faire quelque chose, d'aider les travailleurs et travailleuses indépendantes. Et je m'excuse mon français, mais Nora Loretto est ici s'il y a des questions en français. C'est le COVID, je donne le blâme à COVID. Avant COVID, je suis pas mal parler français, mais maintenant, je l'ai perdu. Je m'excuse. Mais Nora Loretto est ici pour répondre aux questions en français. Merci.
We are now going to start the question and answer portion of this press conference. For the people online, if you have a question, now is the time to use the raise hand function. Going once. Going twice. And I believe this is what concludes today's press conference. Thank you very much.
We covered it all.
Well done.